is Aaron Taylor, and I want to thank you for joining us for this week's Ministry Forecast. You know, throughout Lane County, there are so many different ministries and things that are happening within the community of believers and reaching out to those who don't know Christ. And I just want to take this program each and every week to let you know what's happening within our area where you can get connected and to be familiar with those people who are reaching out and discipling others. Today, I have a special guest with me. That's Scott Stewart, and he wants to share with you some things that are happening in his life. So, Scott, I want to thank you for being with us. Lane County is a great place to have a family, and we obviously have our unchurched nature that seems to be around here.
Yes, we do.
And our anti-Christian, anti-God flavor. And I was just recently sitting with the board of the His Word Broadcasting who airs this programming. And we were talking about how when we air in a place like the Bible Belt in the South,
right.
There's a lot more support than there is in the Northwest.
Yes.
It's hard to make a Christian television broadcast make it in the Northwest. We're very outreach oriented because we have to, because there's a lot of unsaved people in our community, and one of the least churched communities, even though there may be more violence in other places,
right.
We run into that. So as you come today, you have a special area of, you're not a pastor,
Nope.
But you are somebody in the community. You feel like God's given you some things to share with people concerning forgiveness. Is that right?
That is correct.
So
yeah.
tell us a little bit about you, your family, what brought you to here, why you're here, and how we can hear the message that God's given you.
Sure. So I married the girl next door, and by that she literally was right next door, grew up to me. I'm 4 years older than her. We have two daughters, 9 and 13, beautiful kids. I'm very, very blessed to have two. You know, God only gives certain people girls. Did you know that? That's what I've been told. That's what I've been told. So anyway.
They're pretty precious.
They are. I love them dearly. But I went through, in my younger years, I went through some pretty harsh things, and I did not grow up in a church, did not hear God's word literally until I got into my 20s. Now, I heard God's name all the time, right? You understand what I mean by that, but it was never in the context of Scripture. And so I grew up in a home that was not so Christian-like, and there was a lot of love there, Aaron, but there was also a lot of abuse. A lot of mental, verbal abuse, minimal physical abuse, but so I got a lot of mixed signals. And so growing up in that environment also equates to a really low self-esteem. And so I didn't have any kind of a foundation. And at the age of 22, I went through a very horrific event that I would not wish on anybody. And it kind of rocked my whole world, changed my perspectives on things, and changed the way that I looked at people, the way I looked at relationships. And hence, we always seem to, our message, right, our mess becomes our message. You've heard that before, right? And so some of the things that I went through and was able to overcome and go through and then ask Christ into my heart was a segue for the topic of forgiveness. Yeah. And that is, in a nutshell, stems where I've come from, what I've gone through, and what's brought me here today.
Then you've come to this point. Do you mind sharing, kind of opening up what that event is a little more?
Sure.
And then go ahead and share on forgiveness, what it is you think that people that are really dealing, and some of you that are watching today, it's just a couple guys that are talking and we're sharing our heart. But you may have went through some things where you find it very difficult to truly forgive. And in fact, I've sat with people, often young women who've been raped or men who've been molested and raped. And those things are about impossible to forgive.
Right.
I mean, that's the way they look at it. I can't forgive. And part of that's because of what they associate with forgiveness. And that person doesn't deserve their forgiveness.
That's right.
But the topic today, give them your topic and I'll let you take it from there.
So the topic is forgiveness isn't for them. Forgiveness is for you or for us. It's for the person to be set free from it.
Yeah.
So,
Amen.
Aaron, my story, as I was mentioning, an abusive home, low self-esteem. I was that guy that really I couldn't wait to get out of high school because I didn't do well in school. I didn't play sports, and I had a dad that I grew up in. It was always fear-based. It was always fear-based. Now, again, there was love, but it was an unhealthy environment of love, right? Guilt, manipulation, yelling, always in fear of what was going to happen and what was going to be my dad's reaction. And so I couldn't wait to get out of the house. I mean, I could not wait to get out of the house. The soonest I could get out, I did. And I moved out at 18 where I didn't have to deal with him anymore just because it was, you'd always walking on eggshells. He had a very, very short temper. And unfortunately, I have many more bad memories of my dad than I do good memories. Yeah. And to fast forward along here, Pastor Aaron, is I had lived out on my own, and we'll fast forward to the age of 22. And it was August 5th, 1991. It was a Monday night. And that night after work, I was scheduled to stop by my mom and dad's house. And on my way home from work, to have dinner with them, just like any other night, visit there. And I knew that about an hour and a half was all I could take of my dad because he was going to blow his stack about something, or I was going to be accused of something. And so I was there. I even remember what we had. We had spaghetti that night. My mom made awesome spaghetti. I was there. We visited. I made a couple phone calls, and I was getting my things together to leave. And as I walked to the front door, my mom followed me, and I was just going to kind of leave out the door. And my mom says, whoa, wait a minute. I get a hug and I get a kiss. And I turned around, half smiled and hugged her, kissed her, said, I love you, Mom. And what I didn't know was that was going to be the last time that I ever saw her again. So that night, I'm home. I'm in my bed. I get a phone call. It's about 11:30 at night. And it's a family member saying, you need to get over to your mom and dad's house right now. Now. And, I'm woken up and still halfway asleep. I gather my things. I get dressed. I get in the car and I head over there. And it's about an 8-9 mile drive. And on the way there, I get this sickening feeling that I can't describe, but that when something's wrong. And I pull onto their street. Now, where they live, you take a hard left turn, and it's a long straight stretch. And they live about 3/4 of a mile down this straight stretch. When I pulled onto that street, Aaron, it looked like a small town was lit up. Now, by this time, it's midnight. Very kind of a semi-rural urban area. And there are lights, and there are cars and ambulances and paramedics and state police, county police. I mean, the list just goes on. And I pull up, and my heart is racing, and I don't know what has happened. I get out. There's police tape all the way around the house. All the lights are on. It's a summer night. I mean, it's still 75, 80 degrees out. And I'm making a beeline headed straight for Mom and Dad's house, and there are tons of people around that I don't even know who they are. And this officer stops me and pulls me off to the side. He goes, whoa, who are you? And I tell him, and he says, you need to come over here. And I'm just on the edge of an emotional breakdown because I don't know what's happened, but something serious has happened. And what he told me in those next moments forever changed my life. And he said, your mom is deceased, and we have your dad in the Lane County jail. We're holding him. We think he has killed her. We think he's taken her life. And at 22 years old, with no direction, no foundation, nothing in my life other than work hard, make money so I could go have fun and party, my life was completely ripped upside down and inside out. And from those days forward, I went into just kind of a numbness. My dad was incarcerated. About 5 days later, my sister says, I have to go see him. I don't believe this happened. I have to go see him. Will you go with me? I went with her down to the jail to see him. still numb, just not knowing what to think. It was just kind of a cloud, if you will. And I went into where they had him, through the wall there, just like on the TV, they got the glass. And I remember looking at him and just not knowing how to respond or even how to talk to him. And he looked right at me. He has the phone and I have the phone up. And he looked right at me and he said, "Do you think I killed your mom?" And I said, I don't know what to think. I can't believe any of this is real. And Pastor, true story, he looked right at me and he goes, "Well, I didn't, but I said I did to cover up for you because I thought you did it."
Wow.
And once again, it just felt like I got blasted by a shotgun. And I left there just not having any kind of emotion or feeling for anybody. I mean, even my job, for people, I was so just numb and I was so hurt and I was angry and I was emotions. And to fast forward the story.
So can I ask you, at that point, did you think maybe that was true? Or did you think your dad had any reason that he would think that you did it? Or did you think he was just covering?
Well, to answer, the short answer, Aaron, is he was just kind of covering. Yeah. He was a very manipulative man. And when that's all you're raised in, you don't know any different. Right. And that was me. Okay, right. That was me. I didn't know any different. So he probably had thought the police are recording this call, and so this doesn't look so good anymore. I'm going to try and back out of this and put the blame on someone else. Right. And hence, I happen to be the next easiest target.
Brings you down.
Because I was a suspect, because I was so close to my mom. And in any murder case like that, right. the people that are the closest are the immediate targets. They're the ones that they're going to try and find out the soonest. So I went through Mom's funeral, and it was a very, very emotional time. And I became very disconnected. And I kind of went off the tracks, as I think maybe a lot of people would. Yeah. Never really into drugs or anything, but heavily drinking, self-medicating, no responsibilities, no accountability to anyone, became very selfish, and started heading down a track that was headed towards a dark road, right? And a few years of that go by, and I realized there's just, I call it now, at the time I didn't know what it was, but it was God's intuition. It was the Holy Spirit's intuition of kind of going, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep doing this. And I was very fortunate because there were some people that showed up in the right time in my life with the right message that hit me just right. I mean, it was all the right things. And I started entertaining the idea of going to some counseling to start dealing, because I hadn't really dealt with any of this. And I need to back up for 1 second. Mom's gone. My dad's in jail. And 2 weeks later, my aunt takes my grandmother, who was the third closest adult to me, and takes her to go live with her in Nevada. So the three closest parent figures to me are gone. Yeah. And I'm left. There's properties alone. There's attorneys. There is a girlfriend, but not super supportive, not in the way I needed it anyway. I'm sure she thought she was being. But there's attorneys, there's properties, there's police, there's all kinds of things that I've never dealt with before. So I'm overwhelmed with all these responsibilities. And although I didn't deal with them well, I dealt with them probably the best I could have, considering the environment. So I started, about a few years later, I started entertaining the idea, I got to get my head on straight. I got to do something about this. I can't keep going down this road that's headed nowhere. And during this process, my father's attorney, who I'm sure was a lot of help to him, but was no help to me, if you know what I mean. Right. Isolate him.
It wasn't his job.
It wasn't his job, that's right. And so But they gave me an ultimatum. They said, we're going to either have a cleaning crew go into your mom's house and we're going to throw out everything and clean it up to rent it to produce some income, or you can go in and clean it up and live there because eventually you may inherit at least some of this. Very difficult decision because I had never dealt with the loss of my mom yet. I made the decision to clean up the house and move in it. Now, this was the same house where my mom was killed.
Right.
So
and those crime scenes,
yes,
they don't clean them up. And a lot of people don't know that, but
I'm glad you
I've had
mentioned
to deal
that.
with the fact that families, suicides, murders, I mean, where you go in and they just leave.
Yeah.
And you either pay someone to do it, and of course that's not cheap, or you clean it yourself, and it's horrific. It's so personal.
I saw things I would never want someone to ever have to see. And some of those images just don't go away.
Right.
But on to the story.
Yeah.
But I had just some wonderful friends that came alongside me and helped me clean up the house. House sat completely empty for about a year and a half, 2 years. Freezers unplugged, raw meat that had thawed. You get the picture. There was just some very ugly things. So we go in and we clean it up, and I eventually move in there. And it was empowering to know that I was holding on to something that was my mom's and not just letting anybody take it over. But at the same time, it was a chore every day to go into that house.
Because you had a lot of memories.
Every day to go into that house. And it really stagnated the process of trying to heal from this. But I had started going to some counseling, and there had been some things that had been going on in the house that I couldn't explain. And what I mean by that is there was this stench of sulfur. We changed the carpet, we changed the floors, we washed the walls. All of their furniture, all of their stuff was out, but there was still the smell in the house. Couldn't get rid of it. During this time, I'm living...
Can I ask, what was the instrument that she was killed with?
It was a metal pipe or a metal bar. It was about that long, about that diameter.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was, the house was just, we never could get rid of the smell. And as I started asking around, started asking questions, how do you get this house so it smells normal? And some people, interestingly enough, some people would come in the house and go, I don't smell anything. I'd be like, how can you not smell that? And the other people would come in the house and go, what is that? I can smell it. To fast forward along, Pastor, is when we do ungodly things, we attract ungodly things. And out of respect for my mom and dad, I won't go into the details of what those were. I did find out later, but they had attracted ungodly things. And in living in this house, I had a roommate. While I stayed down at one end of the house, my roommate stayed at the other end, which was the end where she was killed. And he would come to me, he goes, why do you got to come down and use my bathroom in the middle of the night? And I'd be like, what? What are you talking about? He goes, yeah, running the faucet, flushing the toilet, shutting the door. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. This went on for about 9 months. And not knowing anything of the spirit world, of Christ's salvation, of his love, not knowing any of that, I started asking questions. And sure enough, the right people showed up in my life and said, man, I got somebody you need to talk to. Now, you know, Pastor Tom Crabb.
Yeah.
Enters into my life, Pastor Tom Crabb of the Cowboy Church. We sit down and we have a conversation. And he says, I tell him the story. And he says, yeah, I know it. Yep, I've heard of it. Yep, I've heard that. Yep, I know what you're talking about. And he says, he goes, do you want all that stuff to stop? And I said, well, yeah. He goes, do you want it to smell better? I said, yeah. He goes, okay. He goes, we can do that. We can come in and we can do a cleansing of the house. And I was like, fantastic, great. And So this proceeds along step by step, and about 3 days beforehand, he calls me and he says, we met up, and he says, now I've got some guys that are going to come over, and we're going to bring scripture, and we're going to anoint up with oil and stuff, and he goes, we're going to cleanse the house. And I was like, man, I'm so thankful, He goes, but I need to know something. He goes, are you saved? Saved of what? Right. What saved of what? I mean, I truly didn't. I was just ignorant. I didn't know. I was naive. And he goes, here's the deal. He goes, if we've got some kind of demonic spirits in the house, if you're not saved, we can get rid of them, but they'll just come back. He goes, so he's waiting for me, right, to make a decision. I said, so basically I need to get saved so this won't continue on. He goes, yeah. He goes, do you want to get saved? And I said, I guess we need to do what we need to do. I'm going to get saved. And so that was how I accepted Christ. And they came in 3 days later, did a cleansing of the house. I'm a brand new Christian, don't even know what I've done yet. Mm-hmm. And they're cleansing the house, and they got the windows open, and they're talking in tongues and going around and putting scripture on the walls and stuff. And all I can think of is, oh my word, what are the neighbors going to think? Right. Because this was so new to me and so far out of what I knew was normal, I couldn't fathom it. I just couldn't grasp it. Yeah. So after that, the house takes on a normal odor, life goes on. I'm in counseling. I'm starting to get my head screwed on straight. And we come to the topic of, with my counselor, she comes on the topic of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, ooh, yeah. Well, let's go ahead and work on these other things, because I'm not forgiving him for anything because he doesn't deserve it, and that's just not really something I was going to do. And in my immaturity and in my where I was at, though, what I didn't understand was forgiveness wasn't for him; it was for me. It was for me to let go of the anger and the bitterness and the resentment. And as I proceeded on with counseling, I'd actually shown up in a couple other churches, and I heard this one Sunday morning. I think I was at Living Hope Church, and at that particular Sunday, I'd heard the pastor say something I'd never heard before, and the light went on. I had that aha moment, and he said, "We do have to forgive them, but it doesn't say we have to trust them. Trust is something totally different. They're not the same." And I had the aha moment. And I started to process that, right? And I started to realize that I could forgive him, because the anger that I was holding on to, I felt like I was a captive. I felt like these chains were on me. And I needed to forgive him to let go of that. Now, it doesn't mean that I was going to trust him again. Right. I had no intention of trusting him again. In fact, as I'm rebuilding my life, I'm realizing that I'm probably, and I don't recommend this for everybody, but I'm better off without him in it. Right. Because of the manipulation and the guilt and the dysfunction and the verbal abuse. I'm just better without him. And so I remember coming to a process where I was finally ready to let go of that. And it truly was a process. I mean, this took me a few years to be able to go through that. And something that was the straw that finally I said, okay, I give up. I surrender. I heard something. And again, another aha moment. And it said that we don't die when we get a snake bite. We don't die from the snake bite. It's not the bite. It's the venom. It's the venom. Yeah, right. And it absolutely just spoke to me. And I went, the venom is the unforgiveness. It's running through my veins. The anger, the bitterness. Yeah. And when I heard that, it just resonated with me, and I realized that I had to let go of that. I had to finish letting go of all of that. And so, again, a process. Through that process, I learned to let go of it. And it was not an easy one, and it was not one that happened overnight, but it was one that I consistently said to myself when I would start feeling angry and been a victim And I was sad, again, that my mom was gone, is that, nope, I forgive him. I choose to let go of it. I'm not going to hold on to this anger. Because there was many, many times that kept resurfacing. And every time I would have to say, no, I'm choosing to not hang on to this. There's nothing I could have done to change it. And so that was an ongoing process for me for a very long time, years. And the further I went, the more I did it, the more I realized that it was true and that it was easier to forgive.
Yeah. Well, Scott, I can't imagine going through what you've went through. And what people don't realize is there's a process.
Yeah.
Not only the process that brings forth the pain from what we've went through in life. And maybe someone's, there today and they're saying, well, I never went through that, but I did go through this.
Right.
And I deal with so many different people and over such a long period of time. But I think there's a lot of people today that are identifying with the pain that you've went through. Maybe it wasn't a murder, maybe it wasn't their mom, maybe it wasn't their dad, but we deal with a lot of prisoners where dad's locked up for something he did or didn't do or was accused of doing.
Right.
But ultimately, those circumstances, as you put so well, are the bite.
Yes.
But the venom, it's a great way of putting it, is really the unforgiveness, what we allow to kill us instead of being healed.
That's right.
And so what I'm going to ask is if you would come back on next week's show and share with us in part 2, just what are some of the step-by-step processes that got you to a place of freedom, really releasing you, but I got to say, releasing him.
Yeah.
Because he's got to begin to deal with this also. And that is aside from you.
Right.
And there are some here today, they've dealt with abuse, rejection, maybe even marriage. And I believe that you can speak to that in our next program.
Sure. I'd love to. Thanks. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next week, and Scott will be with us again here on the Ministry Forecast, Lane County Ministry Forecast. What's happening in our community to bring forth the glory of God and see lives changed. Thank you for being with us.